So you want to go from this bare hilt to something cool like this cord-wrapped hilt. Well, I'm about to show you. I'm Brittany, welcome back to my YouTube channel. All the supplies that you need will include twine. That's really about it. Everything else is optional, including this alcohol pad here. I'm using this just to clean up the sword. As you can see, it's pretty dirty. It's had like a previous hockey tape wrap on it or a tennis wrap. So all I'm going to do is just take that off with the rubbing alcohol so I can start with a nice clean surface. I just cleaned the hilt for now. I'm going to do the rest of the length of the sword later. But once you're done, then you can start getting your twine set up. I just bought Halloween twine. It was like 38 cents at like a craft store. I'm trying to find something that's not too thick. I don't want to end up wrapping it and then have the hilt actually be much thicker. But to get started, I'm just going to create this little tail, and I'm going to lay it along the length of the hilt here just for a couple inches, and then I'm going to start wrapping it around. And I'm actually holding that bit of thread first that I'd put on there on with my thumb. I'm just going to wrap it all the way around, and I want to keep a nice, tight wrap. So this technique that I'm using is actually called whipping, and there's the cat. Hi, Nix. Also make sure that you have a helper so that, you stay on track. So this technique is whipping. You use it for a lot of different wraps. It's not just sword specific. I actually learned how to do it when I was looking up wrapping axe handles. So again, you want to pull it really tight as you're wrapping that twine around, and you can always cinch it down as you go so you can get a couple little wraps and then kind of pull it down and tighten it up as you go. So the rest of this is just a continuation of the same. It's really not very difficult. Just make sure that you're keeping each wrap really, really close to the next, and it's a really, really tight pull as you go along. And you just go right down the hilt with this exact same thing, basically until you reach the end. Once you've sort of got it to the point where you don't have to babysit the little tail that you started with originally and it's pretty secure, you can start to sort of move the sword around and get an orientation that's easier for you to start wrapping it with. As you can see, I flipped it over and now I'm just sort of rolling it with the pommel as I go, because it is a tedious and very tiresome thing to keep doing for such a short hilt, but it does take a little bit of patience. So just a closer look here, you can see that I'm keeping each little turn really, really tight, cinching it down as I go. The reason this technique of whipping works really well is because of the tension and the friction, so you don't actually need to use glue. At the very end, I will secure it with a little bit of glue, but you really don't actually need it if you do this right and you do this tight enough. So now I've wound the twine almost right up to the top. I've left about an inch or so, and I'm going to lay my finger down now and start winding the twine over top of it. At this point, Nix is going to start helping, but I want to start winding over top of my finger so that I'm creating a little bit of space. I'm going to have a little bit of twine left at the end, and I'm going to be able to tuck that in afterwards. And then you just continue winding over top of your finger until you've reached the very, very top of the hilt. So once you've reached the top, you're just going to gently pull the finger out, and there should be a little bit of space there. Now I'm going to take what's left of the thread, and I'm just going to push it back through that little gap that I had made with my finger, as you can see there, and then I'm going to start pulling it tightly. Now as I do that, I want to try and keep it straight and not let the thread kind of pull off to the side too much, but you will find as you do this different ways to kind of tighten it up and keep it all together. I just start sliding the twine kind of over a little bit and checking back on my little tail end of the thread. And again, as you go, you just sort of adjust, and the big thing is just to make sure that it's really, really tight and really straight, and that you're not having any gaps or that you don't have any little loops or anything like that. So you just pull it nice and tight right at the very end there. And once you're satisfied with it, you'll end up with this little tail left over, and then from there, you just have to cut it. So to cut it, you can use a box cutter, like I am, or scissors would probably work really well actually too. And just make sure if you're using a box cutter that you're actually just cutting the tail. You don't want to cut any of the other little wraps, otherwise you'll have to redo this whole process over again. And at this point, maybe it was more efficient to use scissors. And once you've cut that little tail off, you can obviously put your box cutter away to be safe, but you can start kind of smoothing out the little rough end, and it should sit pretty flush. At this point, you could be finished. I'm choosing to just add a little bit of crazy glue here, just because I know this sword is going to get used a lot. It is a loner at my HEMA school, so I just want to make sure that I give it a little bit more reinforcement. But a good, proper whip technique, you probably won't need the glue at all. I chose crazy glue for this because I know that it'll dry clear and you won't see it on the cord wrap, whereas if I use something like hot glue, I know you'd probably see it and it would like leave a visible residue, and I was just looking for a really clean, finished aesthetic. So my final step to the process actually has nothing to do with the cord wrap, it just has to do with cleaning up this nylon synthetic. I'm actually using I think Mr. Clean brand magic eraser, and I'm just cleaning up some of the years of use that are on it. I also found that rubbing alcohol worked extremely well on this, but it's up to you. There's a couple different ways that you can clean up your sword. And now we're done. We've got a fresh, cord-wrapped longsword hilt. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of materials you can use to do a cord wrap whip technique. You could use hemp cord or leather cord, and you can change the color, and you can really make it unique to you. So hopefully you found this tutorial helpful, and I hope that you try to do some cord wrapping yourself. If you have any questions, come find me on Instagram at saint.leafy. Thanks again for watching, guys.